In this section, we will see how we can create multiple choice questions as a part of the class assignment. Go back to create once again, and here there is something called as quiz assignment. I click on quiz assignment. The first step is to give the title name, MCQ, let's say session 2, whatever the name you want to give. Instructions, all questions mandatory, whatever instructions you want to give. Since you have said quiz assignment, you can see here that the Google system has automatically confirmed that you want to use a Google form. Well, of course, you can use a Google form, or you can again attach or add the same way document or an Excel sheet, even for MCQs, as we did in the assignment section. But let us see some good features of the blank quiz form which is in Google. The right side panel remains the same, no changes out here, which is assigning it, scheduling assignments, all students, specific students, give you a number of marks. You can also mention your due date. Now when I click on Google Forms out here, this is where I click on my setups for my Google form. What happens now? I click on my Google form. As the Google form opens, same concept. The Google Forms is within my Google Classroom and is inside the drive, so I don't really have to do any save options out here. There are three important aspects in Google Forms. The first one is the questions area, where you are creating your questions. Second one is the responses, where you can actually see the responses of all the students based on the answers. And third one is the settings tab out here. I'll take you through all these sections one by one. Now first let me change the name of my form. So here's where I can go and change the name. Changing the name at the top right hand side, which is here, actually gives the name to the document. So it gives a name to this document, and the changing name here means you are creating a name for the particular MCQ or multiple choice questions inside the questions format. I don't see any major importance out here, but then let me do this just to show you. Let me call this as MCQ session 2, and here I change the name as midterm. Now let's call it as what can we call it? Class test, something like that. Let me see this. Call it as a class test. You want to give any descriptions for this test, you can give. Of course, if you remember, the instructions have already been given, but now I'll just create questions. What are the types of questions? On the right hand side, you see there are options on creating different types of questions. So you can have you can import your questions if you want. You can add title descriptions. You can also use an image. Rather than, let me first start with the questions. So first question, maybe I can type it, or I can copy paste the questions from my this is where I can start creating my questions. In fact, you can actually copy paste your questions from any document which you already have. I had done this for one of the assignments before. It was very much easier. In fact, when I click on copy and paste, it actually copies the question as well as the multiple choice. But let me tell you how manually you can do that. Let's ask a question out here saying that how many days in a calendar year. Now when I type a questions, here's where I enter the options. I enter the options are 365, 222, 122, whatever it is. And you can also define the answer key to this. So what is the answer to this question? I select this. So the system will then use this for automatic ranking. I've created this, I click on done. Plus you have different options down here, which is quite simple to understand. This is a copy option, and there's a delete option if you want to delete this question. But there's something called as required. You can actually make this question mandatory. You can make certain specific questions in a multiple choice which is to be mandatorily answered. In fact, I have used this key in a very different way. For example, let's say, since I said that the system saves the document with the name and also the name of the document, name of the student and the name of the document. But for a multiple choice, since I get the responses automatically after the multiple choice is completed by the students, the scores is also created automatically. But how will I know? Because I need the scores by roll numbers. I also want somewhere to capture my roll numbers. So what I did here is I basically created a question. I just created one more question out here, and I made this question as like a short answer, and I said just roll number. So what happens here is that though the system sees this as a question, but for me it makes it very easier that the student will just answer and give his roll number out here, and I make this as a required field. If it's a required field, then the question comes in asterisk forms. So I have a field for a roll number and then my questions. Now I go to the next. This is done out here. I go to the next question. Similarly, you can create as much as questions as you want. And now if you see here, there are 3 dot buttons. So what are these three dot buttons? Let's see these 3 dot buttons. These 3 dot buttons are basically giving me an option where I can shuffle the questions out here. I can shuffle the option order, which means every student, the questions will get jumbled up. So I can use that as a feature. There's another feature basically which is called as go to section based on an answer. This is a bit of detailed exercise. For example, if there is a question which you have created, let's say, how did you like my restaurant? So if the respondent answers, yes, I like the restaurant very much, then you want, based on the answer, you want the question to jump to question number 7, which is how did you like the food? So which means that you can actually make section based questions and answers here, which is not relevant, so I'll just leave it and not explain too much on this. After creating your MCQs, let's go to the settings tab. In settings tabs, there are 3 tabs out here. First tab is collect email address. So if we can say collect email address, I just leave all those things as options, leave it for the faculty to decide. But really does not make sense to have the respondent edit after submit or see a summary chart and text responses. Since I'm going to use this as an MCQ, I don't want to use these features. But yes, if I'm using this as some sort of a survey and all those stuff, then I can maybe use these additional features. I go to the presentation tab. I don't really, if there are 50-60 questions, then you can use this the progress bar. You can shuffle the question orders, which I did earlier as well. You can do both. But more important is the last tab, quizzes. So I just say that make this MCQ as a quiz, which means assign point values to each questions. And also you have an option to release the grade immediately or maybe later after manual reviews. Doing that, do I want the respondent to see the missed questions? No, I don't want. Do I want him to see the correct answers? No, I don't want. Point values, just leave it. Fine. So this is the setting tabs, which is more important. I finished the setting tabs. I have also mentioned in terms of what are the points, the answer keys. Once you have defined your answer keys, then you say that how much marks the question carries. I can define this as well. So for each questions you have defined the marks. For each questions you also have defined the answers. For questions you have defined whether the field is required or not. You also shuffle the questions in your settings tab. So this completes your MCQs. And once the students, when they start submitting this in your class work, you will start seeing how many people have turned in, how many have not turned in, so on and so forth. And once all have turned in, you can go back to this form. I will show you how it happens in my in the subsequent section. So I've created this form. I close this form. The form is ready. So the form names, everything is correct. So I close this form once again and I say assign. So this gets assigned to all my students. Once the assignment work is over, now let's log in as a student and see how this Google quiz appears for a student. So I click on, I just go as a login as a student. Student goes into his classroom. Student also gets an email of any assignments been submitted, so that is an automated alert post which he gets. So the student logs in to his classroom. It says that an MCQ has already been posted. The student clicks on that MCQ. On the right hand side you see that it is saying that whether have you completed or you're not completed. So you have this option out here. So the student now will go to his classroom, then goes on clicks on the class test which is being assigned to him. Now this is how the form looks for the student. If you see that I had created a question called as roll numbers, so that's what appears out here, and the star dot means that this is mandatory. And you see that since I had said a manual review and I had clicked on email address, so that is why it is also asking for email address. So the student will enter his email address as a start of the questions. You see here, if you don't enter, it says it's a required question. Student enters his email address, he enters his roll number, and then starts answering all the questions. Now once the student has completed answering, he clicks on submit and says that response submitted and assignment as marked as done. Student will close this tab and then he goes to his classroom for the assignments. Now why this is also important is that maybe a student will have multiple assignments which you have assigned to him. So this is a double check. So if the student has already submitted in the Google form, after 2-3 seconds this automatically gets converted into turned in. Now the student has turned in his Google forms and MCQs. I close this tab. Now as a tutor I see the MCQ questions, click on, and I see that one student has already turned in my questions and responses. Interesting. So I click on the Google class form. Now if you see, there is a small edit button on this part out here. This is the edit button which you have to click. So I click on this edit button. So it opens up the Google form which I had created, and here you see the response tab. So all the students who have responded, the total comes in here. So if you have 60 students and all have turned in, it will say 60 points, 60 responses. I click on the responses. Then I have by each and every questions, there are a lot of insights which is here. Maybe these insights are helpful and useful, particularly when you're doing a survey. But from a MCQ point of view, all I have to do is click on the spreadsheets and then say create a new spreadsheet. So when I create a spreadsheet, and if I have 60 students, I automatically get the scores of all the students. If you see here, I'm getting the scores of all the students. Now since there was no other way to capture roll number, that is why I created roll number as a mandatory questions. So which means that I'll get all the rank scores by roll numbers, which will be easy for me to copy paste in my mark sheets or in my ICA sheets which I want to submit. So this completes the MCQ part of assignment sections. So by this, how to use Google Forms, how to use assignments, how to use materials have been completed. Then there's only one small thing which is called as question. Question is nothing but you can just ask one question, like the way we ask questions in the class. So similarly, you can just ask one question and you can see how students are responding. And that is what the question part is in the classwork. But otherwise, the most important part is material, assignments, and Google Forms. Thank you very much for these sessions. In case you have any queries, you can call me directly and I'll be able to help you, and will be glad to help you move further. Thank you very much.